3, 2, 1, action. Welcome to the Hóčhoka podcast.
Good morning. Matakiapi. Welcome to Hóčhoka here at the center of the St. Joe's Indian School campus. I'm Scott Wooster, today's host for the podcast, and we're all glad that you've joined our circle here today. This morning I have with me student coordinator Jennie Schilling, who is here to talk this morning about programs that we do here in the school, talk a little bit about what she does, talk about what we like to see as a strength-based program and builds our children up in a good way. That's how I like to look at it. And we want to talk to her about the tools that she uses in the school to help when kids are having difficulties in the school, and maybe we can provide some tools for folks who are watching this morning or watching whenever you watch it, and that all of our staff here at the school use. So today is part one of Jennie Schilling on kid whispering. What do you do?
That's a good question.
Right, exactly. What's a normal day look like for you?
So for people to better understand it, if you say dean of students, that
Yep.
seems to kind of make people go, oh, you know. So basically, what I do is, if the students for any reason can't make it in the classroom, they come to see me. Now that is not strictly a behavior thing. It could be they're homesick.
Mm-hmm.
It could be they didn't get a good night's sleep and they just can't keep their head up. They can't keep their eyes open. They just need a break, you know. It could be they had an argument with somebody and they aren't quite over it. So you never quite know what the reason is. And sometimes they'll come down and sit for 10 minutes, take a break. That's all they need. They just need that time to regroup. So that's kind of what my office is. And, you know, there are times that I get students down there that are very upset, very angry, something has happened, and we need to process through things. But it's kind of a catch-all. Any kind of behaviors during the day or anything that just needs to be attended to, if it can't be attended to in the classroom, then they come to see me.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've thought of it in terms of being a vice principal sort of position,
Yeah,
which is
sort
not
of.
exactly what it is. When I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
when you were a kid, likely a vice principal is somewhere you were sent to if you were doing something wrong. Not
Right.
us, of course, but
No, not
people
us.
people were sent to a vice
Right.
principal if they were doing something wrong.
Right.
At our school, I think over the 28 years that I've been here, that position has molded itself, and with your help, in big part, to become a position where kids are sent there not in a punitive sense, and
Right.
and I said it in the header to our interview today, or that we're looking at a strength-based approach.
Right.
And the other part of what you do, so I mentioned that you're a dean of students, the
Right.
student coordinator.
Student coordinator,
Okay.
yeah.
And I don't worry as much about titles. I like
Right.
what you do on a
Right.
day-to-day basis. But the other part of what you do, there are many hats that you wear, but one other big hat that you wear is as a trainer for CPI,
Correct. Yes.
and LSCI.
I don't train for LSCI.
Okay.
I haven't been trained in that yet.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously, that's a big part of when I talk to the kids. That's kind of the rules that I follow.
Okay.
Is the way they have that set up.
Yep.
But yeah, CPI is what I'm trained in. I've been doing that for 12, 15 years, I think.
Okay. So let's talk about CPI.
Okay.
What is CPI? What does it stand for?
So CPI stands for Crisis Prevention Intervention, or it can also be known as NCI, which is Nonviolent Crisis Intervention. So basically, the basis of CPI is very similar to LSCI. That's why they work so well together. We want to watch for early signs of behavior. We want to intervene as early as we possibly can. If you see one of our students that you have a good relationship, that you know, and you see they're acting a little bit differently, that's the point that you want to step in. And that's kind of what CPI talks about, is recognizing those signs. It also talks about how sometimes it maybe won't start so subtle and all of a sudden it's just a blow up, and then how you kind of proceed from there. So it gives you a lot of good skills to kind of deal with the student at different phases of the crisis situation that they may be in, from something very small to something very large and everything in between. So there's a lot of good information in there. There is a physical part to CPI where we actually learn hands-on, some holds and stuff, but we do not use those very often at all. I mean,
Right.
I can't even tell you the last time that I've had to use one of those.
Isn't that nice?
It is very nice.
Yeah.
Yes. And we stress that in our trainings too, is that it has to be an absolute last resort if you're going to do the hands-on stuff. It has to be the student is in some kind of danger, or the people around them are in some kind of danger, that you have to put hands on. So it's a good program. I think it teaches you to look past the behavior, because the behavior is right there on the surface, and that's the first thing you see, and you want to make your judgment right away with that behavior. And that's 99.9% of the time not what's going on with that kid. So CPI and LSCI help you look below that behavior to get to the deep stuff, to figure out what's going on, to teach new skills so that in the future they can manage it better and not get to the crisis situation that they were at this point.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so if you're working with kids here at St. Joe's, you are at some point going to go through that training, the CPI
Correct.
training. And
Correct.
so I've been in your trainings before that you do with your co-trainer, Mike Pooley, correct?
Mhm.
And both of you, I think, you both have a lot of experience here, many years of working with kids.
Right.
And being that person that they would go to if they're in crisis, or if they're,
Right.
if they're struggling. And the training is really, really useful. So we learn basically what you just said in a nutshell is what we would get
Right.
in a hour to three
The
hour
refreshers
long
are 3. Yeah. The full classes are 8. Yeah.
And it really makes me think. I mean, we get into those situations, and it's easy to lose your head
Yep.
a little bit and forget what brought the kid to the situation in the first place.
Yep.
And I look at St. Joe's, we're so blessed here at this school, really. We have so many wraparound services
Yes.
here, where from our counseling services, of course, and I'm a counselor, so it fits in what you're doing educationally, behaviorally, all that, nurturing emotions and
Right.
dealing with a lot of tough emotions, anger,
Yeah.
sadness, which we all have. You
Right.
have it, I have it.
Right.
Every adult does, and every kid does. And we're trying to treat that, I feel like, with as much dignity as we can
Yes.
possibly do. And we try to do that in the school, in the residence, in the counseling setting, spiritually. And I think when all those programs at the school come together, it wraps around the kid in a good way, treats them in a humane way, and
Right.
builds on their strengths. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think with CPI and LSCI, everybody's speaking the same language.
Yep.
All the adults that work with the kids understand it. I think even in 7th and 8th grade, there's even a little LSCI enrichment that they do with the kids,
Yeah.
so they can understand that better. So when they come to my office, I'm not gonna lie, they do come in like, what am I? I mean, you can just see
Yeah.
them searching
Oh,
their
sure.
mind. Did I do something? What did and sometimes they do get a consequence walking out of my office, but they
Absolutely.
do know. I would like to think they do know that when they come in, we're gonna sit and talk. I'm gonna listen, and then we're gonna figure it out from there.
Yeah.
There's no prejudgments when you come in, and we'll just figure out what happened, what's going on. Let's make this better so you can get back to class.
Right.
That's what we do.
Right. And as a counselor, kids have their stories. They need to be heard.
Right.
We've talked on this podcast for a few episodes about truth and healing, and hearing stories from folks who have gone to boarding school and hearing the things that they have to say. And I'm not sure these folks, when they were going to school, were always listened to.
Right.
And I wasn't there.
Right.
But my sense from what I hear is that didn't happen all the time. And one of the things that I love about this is that you have that opportunity to do that in your office where they can come to you and you are going to listen with a non-judgmental ear. And I always tell my kids this in the counseling session, where I try to do the same thing, where you're listening to what they have to say, but I always try to tell them, give me honesty, and
yes.
whatever comes of that, the honesty that builds integrity, helps you build your values, all those kinds of things. It's so important, and you may not solve it right there in that one session when a kid ends up in my office or your office, but it's going to build over time as they know that you're willing to listen to them and that you want to hear what they have to say and that you can handle that.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about how this approach that we have today, how you operate in your room, is different than the ones that you and I would have grown up with in our schools?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think the big thing is kids are listened to, and they're not just judged on the surface behavior. I think that's the big thing, because I don't know about you, but when I was younger, there were rules. The adults were the rulers. You followed the rules, and that's what you did. And granted, there are still rules today, but we give the kids a chance to share their side of the story. And I think when I was a kid, I didn't always get to share that side.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yep.
You know, that we take the time to listen to them and to and let them know that we're going to honor what they have to say, and we're going to try to figure it out and not just assume, oh, you were in the bathroom with an ink pen, you must have wrote this on the wall, that kind of thing. So I think that's the biggest difference, is we just kind of delve into it a little bit more and not just assume, you know, what we see on the surface.
Right.
Yeah.
Takes a little more work to do it that way, doesn't it?
It does, a little longer.
It pays off.
It does.
It
does.
Definitely pays off. Because the goal for the student ultimately is what?
Right. So the goal for the student would be, we want them ultimately to learn to recognize their behaviors early, so that they can feel when they're starting to get upset, to learn to manage their behaviors, and then to learn skills to use when they can feel those behaviors coming on. So that's our hope for them.
So thanks again, Jennie. Here we are at the Hóčhoka podcast from the center of St. Joseph Indian School. We've been talking about issues that are central to Native American education. We'll see you next time, and in the meantime, stay centered.